Valve loves to abandon games. Half-Life, CSGO, TF2, they love letting their games and franchises fall into disrepair. It may seem weird to you. Why would they let these insanely popular franchises die out? Couldn't they be making tons of money? Yes, they could, but they are sitting on a gold mine that makes more money than any popular franchise could, because the economics of their platform Steam are truly baffling. It makes developing games look like swimming in the kiddie pool. Steam was founded in 2003 by Valve as a way for them to patch their existing PC games. It worked for patches, but they saw the potential market for a way for people to effectively distribute games digitally versus with physical discs. Gabe Newell, founder of Valve, wanted a way to get more users onto the service as he saw its potential. So when Half-Life 2 was released, he made people have to sign up for a Steam account to be able to play it. For the first 2 years of its existence, it was mainly focused on Valve-published games, but that began to change in 2005. They started to sign on other publishers and allow games beyond just what they created onto the platform. The way it worked was that they would take a percentage of all sales because they hosted the game. This was an insanely profitable business model. Instead of having all of the costs associated with development and maintenance of a title, you just had the marketplace. While the market wasn't there yet, Gabe Newell realized it was just a matter of time. They continued to add more and more titles throughout 06 and 07, but it really ramped up in 2008 when they allowed anyone to upload games to Steam under the same deal that Valve received a percentage of all sales. Their momentum was pretty unstoppable, but in 2011, they introduced something genius. The workshop. Basically, the communities of the game would develop content around the game, and if Valve ever found a way to monetize it, they could, in exchange for a payment to the creator. This basically allowed them to outsource some of the content creation while also increasing community engagement. They had a massive amount of the PC gaming community on their app, with a user base of over 35 million. That alone would be considered a huge success, but it was just the beginning. The next few years would see Steam's first few failures as well. Steam OS was their first foray into an operating system. It wasn't that it necessarily failed for everyone. Some people love it, but for the most part it didn't live up to its goals of competing with Windows or Linux. Thankfully, the few failures they did have were mostly overlooked by their insane momentum, and by the end of 2014, they had 75 million users. The user base was generating a ton of cash. 75 million users purchasing games led to massive earnings, since all Valve had to do was host the marketplace. But they ended up having quite a few flops for a short stretch. They attempted to break into the live streaming space by making a competitor to Twitch, which failed. They also tried to break into the console space with their advent called the Steam Machine. It had its own controller and used the Steam OS we were talking about earlier, but it just couldn't get momentum. There was no way it could really compete with Microsoft and Sony in that field. They also started to be hit with multiple lawsuits, totaling tens of millions. They included employee discrimination, consumer trust violations, and more. Their luck wouldn't really upturn for some time, as they spend the next few years shutting down operations they're trying to start, like the live streaming. They also admitted defeat on the Steam Link. Another majorly unpopular decision was their choice to reduce the amount of money they paid creators on the Steam Workshop. Overall, they've become a juggernaut, and while companies like Epic and EA have tried their best to make competing platforms for their games, no one's able to compete with Steam. Their income is massive and comes from so many streams in which there's not a lot of overhead. They literally make more money just owning the platform than they ever would really putting attention into TF2 or Half-Life anymore. For example, earlier we talked about how they simply get a cut of all game sales attributed to the platform. This alone generates money like you wouldn't believe. The cut varies depending on how much revenue each particular game generates, but it starts at 30%. That's right, Valve gets 30% of game sales alone. Now, this does drop down the more revenue you make, but the lowest it goes is 20%. That means, for a game like Call of Duty, they're taking a cool 20% of the sale just for owning the platform. It's not really known exactly how many games are sold on Steam every year, but it is estimated to be well over 400 million. If you have a way to make 20% of each transaction, and the platform proceeds to get close to 500 million transactions, you're probably doing incredibly well. Compare this to the amount of profit that's possible from developing a title, and it makes sense as to why this is their main focus. But it doesn't stop there. They take a further cut out of all marketplace transactions as well. This means almost all cosmetics and DLC purchases see an additional fee on them. They take 20% of all the money spent on the game itself, and then double dip when you buy anything in-game, with an additional 20 to 30% fee depending on how much revenue the game generates. Think about the implications of this in games like CSGO with huge marketplace transactions, or franchises like Call of Duty with their DLC and Battle Pass systems. You can see how the world of development just isn't as lucrative to Gabe Newell and the team at Valve anymore. Their revenue stream grows even more diverse when you realize that Steam also turns around and sells advertising spaces to the same games listed on the platform. This is pretty standard for any marketplace. Think paying to be placed on the home screen of the Xbox store. The one caveat that Steam has, which is genius, is that it takes the company's money for advertising spaces. But even if a customer purchases the game, it still takes that 20% cut as well. So they're making money from companies paying to be placed on the homepage, and also making money off the effectiveness of their ads. It's an almost perfect loop for monetization. Their franchises, while not as updated as they once were, are still money machines too. Between CSGO, Dota, Half-Life, Team Fortress Portal, and Left 4 Dead, they have a backlog of classic games that still make a considerable amount. While some of these games are literally in such bad states the community is having to stage protests, since it's just a small piece of their overall revenue puzzle, it isn't a priority. TF2 in particular has been all but abandoned by Valve, but still generates millions in revenue a year, regardless of the absolutely terrible state of the game. They also have software like the Developer Toolkit, needed for people to integrate their games into Steam, which they sell for a handsome profit. Looking forward to potential growth revenue streams, they're breaking into the hardware game once again. While their first few tries didn't leave anyone too impressed, their recent foray into the Steam Deck has seen considerable critical success. If they add yet another profitable revenue stream into their already impressive system, it would put them in pole position to eventually compete with gaming giants like Sony and Microsoft. While the Steam Deck is conceptually similar to the Nintendo Switch, it appeals to a different demographic of the more intense gamer. Another unique advantage to Steam is that of being a private company. While most companies of this revenue size are public, meaning traded on a stock exchange, it means they have to communicate constantly with shareholders. This makes it hard for them to be able to spend time on new ventures that aren't instantly profitable. Since Valve doesn't have the same structure, they can take risks and invest in things that may not be profitable at first. This may have delivered some crappy results in the past, but it's also how you eventually find diamonds in the rough ideas. The idea of venturing out into a software marketplace specifically for video games when you're already a massively profitable game development studio would be frowned upon if you were public. The ability to take risks means their earnings have the potential to multiply over time. Not that public companies can't continue to grow, but their risk-taking profile is much different than something being steered in a private direction. No matter which way you look at it, the economics of Steam are simply baffling. They generate immense amounts of money in so many different ways. It's also clear why at this current point in time, they've put a lot of their own titles and properties on the back burner. Bringing on more and more publishers to get a free cut of their hard work is a much more lucrative proposition from a purely business standpoint. That may make gamers around the world not thrilled. I certainly am one of them. Unfortunately for us, the gaming world is becoming more and more business-like, and the odds of them suddenly deviating from this profitable course are slim to none. That'll do it for this video. If you enjoyed, press the like button, comment, and subscribe for the best business-related content on the platform. If you really enjoyed this video, check out the one on screen next.